It's a longer title now, for Kowa. And it's a great pleasure for us to be involved with the Toronto birding celebration. So really excited to be able to help that. I am an avid birder myself and a migration junkie, so I definitely appreciate what's going on here. Tonight, we're going to take, if I might, start up a presentation, give you a quick introduction to some optical principles. Only we're not going to get too carried away on it. Just about, maybe 10 minutes at most. And then we're going to move on to Yousif, and then we'll take questions at the end, as mentioned. Let's see here. I want to start from the beginning. There we go. So, like I said, this is just a brief introduction to some of the basics of optics. We can do obviously a lot more, and if there's interest in that, you can always let Olivia and Yousif know about that. We'd be happy to do a more comprehensive review at some time that people could sign in and they could advertise to the membership. But for now, just want to start off by saying there's a lot of terms out there, and again, we're not going to take the time to define all of these, but I did want to just cautionary tale and mention it. At the end of the day, when you're looking at optics, you have to really take all of the specifications and some of these terms with a great deal of, I take it with a grain of salt, perhaps. Half of these are derived from pure mathematical formulas that just, look at the objective size and the power of magnification. They don't take into account the quality of glass, so things like exit pupil, relative brightness index, twilight factor. $100 8x40 and a $3,000 8x40 binocular would have the exact same ratings there, even though we know absolutely when you look at the cheap one to the most expensive one, there's going to be a day and night difference in the amount of light delivered. So again, that's this is more something that is useful for looking at the differences within one manufacturer's line, perhaps, okay? And many of the others too that are more subjective, because there's not set standards in the optics industry that are universally accepted. Many manufacturers will measure and represent some of these different specifications differently. So again, they're really not comparable across the board. So the best thing to do really is to get a hold of one of your local stores, shops. In particular, if you have birding shops, is one of the best ways to go, because they really understand, what it is you want to do with the optics and what your expectations are, and they can help guide you. And Gary, we've got a few dealers, I think, in the area, don't we?
Absolutely, yes. There's Wild Birds Unlimited shops, particularly in one, probably the best selection in Toronto, in Etobicoke. And there's urban nature stores scattered across the GTA. Lots of options there, so good, knowledgeable staff.
I mean, that's one of the best ways to do it. The other, of course, would be to, talk to your friends and colleagues in the field and find out, what they've used, what they've liked, what they haven't, and even perhaps even, get the opportunity to test them at the same time. The biggest difference between that, $100 level and the, like I said, $3,000 level and everything in between is going to be the quality of the glass, primarily the quality of the build and the coatings used on the huge array of different types of glass, which this is to remind me what I was going to talk about here. And you have to take that into consideration. That's where the big price difference comes, and it's these coatings and the quality of glass are going to be what makes a difference and allows you to resolve detail more effectively and deliver more light through the optic based on, better glass and higher quality glass with better coatings on it. But the price goes up because they're more expensive, obviously, to make and manufacture. We've got a lot of different types of binoculars out there. There's sort of a lineup of different types. Not going to get into a lot here. Just want to give you an idea that binoculars come in all sizes and shapes. And as you might expect, there is compromises that you will have to take into account when you select a different power of magnification, a different size objective lens, or one of the different styles. And we'll get into some of that here. This is one particular line. This is our BD2 line, our best-selling line that Kowa has. But to give you an idea, here's 3 different optics. The one in the hand, of course, is a compact binocular, and compacts are designed to be able to fold up and stick in your pocket. As the name implies, they're very compact in size, but they really are designed more as a backup so that you've got something with you all the time. In my many, many years of birding and guiding, I've run into folks trying to use compact binoculars as their primary binoculars very often. And you have to give up a lot of challenges. I mean, you have to compromise, excuse me, a lot of performance to be able to fold that thing up and put it in your pocket. One is the circle of light coming out there is not going to fill all the cones and rods in your eye because it's a very small circle of light. So you're going to suffer from some resolution problems with that. They tend to not be very good at close focus and very narrow field of view from side to side. And that's one of the biggest things. It seems the people that are using a compact binocular are always the ones struggling to find the bird because they've got this very narrow field from side to side of what they can see. So again, I think due to that, we've got the full-size binoculars up to the right. We've got a 42 is the larger one and a 32 millimeter model below. And the 42 for years, or the 8x40s, have been sort of the bread and butter for many, many years. But I'd say starting maybe 12, 15 years ago, these what we call mid-sized binoculars, as the glass and coatings got better and better, and we're delivering more light through these smaller optics, have become a very popular compromise. They approach the size and weight of the compact, but not quite as small. But in performance, they absolutely perform like the full-size binocular with a very wide field of view and very excellent close focus. As a matter of fact, in most models, the 42, compare the 42 to the 32 millimeter models. The 32 outperforms the 42 in field of view and its closer focus, almost invariably in most lines. So that's something to consider if you want something lightweight and smaller. Look at the 32. Try to stay away from the compacts unless you're buying something to keep in your pocket at all times or in your purse or whatever, but not as a primary glass.
Yeah.
Our 3 most popular models of binoculars we've got here would be the Genesis line, our high-end line, our BD2 line, which is a mid-line ranging $399, $449-ish here in the US. What do they run in Canada? Is it, yeah, same.
More like 500.
500. Okay, yeah, in the US with the exchange rate, but still in that price range, that sort of that mid-range there, our most popular glass. And then we've got our YF2, which is really designed as a beginner glass, about $120 US. What's it run in Canada?
159.
159. So
Right.
again, that's our kind of starting glass. I'm not going to make this commercial, but I will say, moving on to spotting scopes, we have a lot more spotting scopes than what I'm showing here. We've got about 7 lines of spotting scopes, but our best sellers are the higher end products. And in our line, we call them the Prominar series. And I think the reason for that is, even though we make price point products, I think that when you get into higher magnification, it's just more critical. And in less expensive product, I think it's easier to get away with a less expensive binocular than it is a less expensive spotting scope, because to do resolve detail at higher magnification requires, I think, a little better glass, to be happy with the results. And so, our 55 series, our 550, 770, 88 series, and our 99 series are our best sellers there. I think that's all I really had on the optics. Gary, do you have anything you wanted to add that I didn't touch base on? Stop the share here.
That was awesome. Thanks, Jeff. I think you covered that very well and quickly with the time we have. I mean, you can take a whole week talking about optics, of course. So, but one of the cool things about Kowa optics as well is that we use something called Eco Glass. That isn't talked about very much, but it's actually a more environmentally friendly glass that we use that does not use arsenic or lead in its manufacturing process. So that might be a consideration for some people as well.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just environmentally, in speaking, Kowa is very happy to support a lot of the birding initiatives, and we do a lot on the birding side. More so, I'm going to say, than a lot of others. And I think the reason part of that is because we don't carry rifle scopes, so hunting doesn't become a huge as large of a component in our sales because we don't carry those products. So birding tends to be a larger, perhaps, overall percentage of our total consumer base. But at any rate, we're happy to be here. Really excited to be working with Birds Canada. And I guess that was where I was going to go with that more than anything else. I guess we can move on to the next segment, and then we'll get to the Q&A. Olivia, Yousif.
Yeah, that was awesome, Jeff. Thank you. You really covered everything that you need to know about optics in a very short period of time. I'm sure, like Gary said, you could probably do a lot. You could talk a lot more about this. But so now that Jeff has covered, a bit of an intro on optics and the technical side of things, I want to talk about the the application. So how to choose the best pair of binoculars for the type of birding that you do. So I'll share my screen here. And so you should be able to see my slides, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Yousif Attia, and I work for Birds Canada as part of a team that coordinates the Christmas bird count and eBirding Canada. And I also help manage our website. I also lead birding tours around Canada and internationally for Eagle Eye Tours. But most of all, I'm a lifelong birder, and although I'm not an expert on optics, I do spend a lot of time using optics, and I'm also people's perspectives. Like I'm one of those people who will ask other birders which optics they like, ask them about the optics they're using, and I think Jeff already mentioned, if you get a chance to use other people's binoculars, it's a great opportunity to look through them, especially when you're in the process of looking for a new pair of binoculars.
Definitely.
Let's see here. Okay, so a little bit of a breakdown. I just want to cover about 4 things here really quickly so we can have lots of time to answer questions. But I think it's fair to say that binoculars are the most important go-to tool for birding. I always like to say that the best thing about binoculars is the batteries never die. Like, we're always using our devices and phones and cameras and stuff, but binoculars you can always rely on. So that's the most important tool. My first 2 points are going to discuss the birding with binoculars and which type of binoculars work best. Then I'll talk briefly about spotting scopes and why I'm a huge proponent of birding with spotting scopes. And then I'll have a few points about what to consider when purchasing new binoculars. So for general birding, nature viewing, and just sort of if you had to choose one type of binocular that would kind of cover all the bases, I would typically recommend an 8 times magnification. So 8, that means that the view that you're getting is 8 times more than your naked eye. And there are models of binoculars that are less than 8 times, but the most popular seems to be 8. And most makes will have up to 8.5 or 8, and sometimes 7 times, but around that 8 times is is sort of the sweet spot. And what you're getting there is a field of view that is a little bit wider. So when you're birding in, let's say, closed environment or a forest or a backyard, you want a field of view that's a little bit wider, and you're going to get that with the 8 times because it's just lower magnification. So that helps you when you're trying to pick out a bird, for example, like this Blackburnian warbler. So anytime you're birding in a forest environment and you need to find small birds moving around in trees, this wider field of view is going to be in your favor. The other thing you have to remember is that when you're magnifying your view, you're also magnifying your movements. So something like if you know you've got unsteady hands or shaky hands, I would definitely stay away from higher magnifications than 8 times, because your movements are also magnified. And if you're trying to look through a view and you're seeing it's shaking, 8 times is going to be more forgiving than something higher like a 10 times magnification. The other thing is a lot of us are interested in more than just birds, or interested in looking at birds through the binoculars that are even very close. You can get really great details, even something that you can see the bird with your naked eye, but getting on it with binoculars, you can just take a little bit more appreciation of the feather details, that kind of thing. Or butterflies, butterflies are often quite close. And although an 8 times or a 10 times might have the same close focus, you are probably going to have a better chance of getting that butterfly or bird in your view with a lower magnification. So that's another good reason to have an 8 times binocular. And for those people who go birding and also use a spotting scope, an 8 times or lower magnification is going to be really help cover all the bases, because you're probably going to use your scope for anything that's really far away, and your binoculars are there for anything close. So for lack of a better word, there's the other type of birding is like focused or targeted or specialty birding, right? So some of us have an interest in some species groups like gulls, going gulling or shorebirding, or if you're doing hawk counts or sea watches, or any type of birding that keeps you sort of in one place for a long period of time, looking over a landscape that where things are usually further away. That type of birding, I find 10 times binoculars or higher come into play. In those cases, you have a little bit more reach with the higher magnification. So a 10 times binocular is often the choice for people who do hawk watches, for example, for that reason. If you're birding in a lot of open landscapes, like in the prairies or looking over lakes or up in the tundra, having a little bit more reach with that 10 times magnification is beneficial. And again, this is largely my experience and experience of people I talk to. It doesn't mean that if you have a 10 times binocular, it's not going to be suited for all around birding. There's just a little bit of a difference, so I'm just sort of presenting that. So I did mention that I'm a big fan of spotting scopes, and coincidentally, I suppose Kowa were instrumental in in the early days of spotting scope development, and spotting scopes are, I'm not going to use this. I don't think this is saying it too lightly, that the spotting scopes are a game changer when you're birding. You just get so much more range. If you're doing anything, if you're doing specialty birding where you're looking at gulls and shorebirds, like, unless they're very, very close, you're not going to see the detail needed to make those identifications without a spotting scope. So spotting scopes are really important. If you have a phone, which we all seem to have these days, you can digiscope right through your spotting scope. I suppose it's possible with binoculars as well, but with a spotting scope, it's just really easy to hold your phone up to the eyepiece and snap a record shot, or actually in some cases get, depending on the scope you have, get really good video or photos. I mean, and Jeff, if you follow Jeff on social media, he's done some incredible things with just his phone as an adapter and spotting scope. So having that spotting scope, you're also able to document your birding, which is a plus as well. And then, going back to increasing that range of detection. And this is not a science, but I'm going to try to illustrate what I think I've noticed with while birding just with binoculars and with a spotting scope. So this is one of my favorite birding spots. Gary Point Park here in southwestern British Columbia. This is the Fraser River estuary. Can I put a little laser pointer or show my mouse or something? Can you see my mouse now?
We can see your mouse.
Awesome, thanks, Olivia. So this is the Fraser River estuary, and so this star represents my sort of favorite migration standing spot. And I've learned that on average, I can identify birds with just binoculars within about a 200-meter range or so. Like, and that depends on the size of the bird and a lot of other things. And there's going to be birds that are further that I can identify that are larger, the flybys and that sort of thing. But I think it's fair to say that in my experience, when I'm birding here, I can identify birds with binoculars no further than this. Now, we'll zoom out a little bit, same place, zoom out, standing in the same spot. There's the binocular range. And I noticed that I can identify birds this much further. In the green circle represents where I can now see with my spotting scope. And that obviously doesn't apply to all birds. Really small birds really far away, I won't be able to identify. And there are some large birds that I've identified that are even further away. But the difference is approximately 3 times or more a range of detection, right? So this is just to show you that if you want to go birding, and you, especially in an environment where there are open landscapes, and you take your spotting scope with you, you will see more birds and identify more, more species of birds. And if you're somebody who uses eBird, for example, you'll be able to increase your, the usefulness of your birding by identifying birds further. So carrying a spotting scope goes a long way. Last thing I want to talk about really quickly here is some considerations when purchasing binoculars or mostly binoculars. I'm not going to get into the purchasing scopes, but for me, I found that ergonomics and feel is important. I would say don't get too caught up in the different brands or makes or models that, or the very best binoculars. Just go around, see if you can pick up a few pairs of binoculars. As Jeff mentioned, you can usually do that at the stores the dealers that sell optics, or asking friends or people that you run into, and get a feel for them. See how they balance in your hands. Check out where the focus knob is. How does it feel? You're going to be holding these things for a long time, so you'll want to make sure that ergonomics fits for you, and everybody is different. I've already mentioned this mid-range, or that slightly smaller range of objectives in the 32 range. So, and like, for example, an 8x32 versus an 8x42, that size of binoculars have become really popular for good reason, because as Jeff also said, the coatings and optics have become so good that we can reduce the size of the binocular now and still get a lot of that same image quality coming through, and you're carrying less weight. So for someone like me, I'm birding for, sometimes all day. I've got binoculars around my neck. I'm usually carrying a camera. I've got a scope as well. If I can reduce the weight of my binoculars and still get just as much detail, I'm going for an 8x32 binocular. So it used to be that everyone just went straight for the larger objectives, the 8x42s or 10x50s. But it isn't the case anymore because the technology has improved so much. So I want to make a case for trying out that smaller size. And the difference is, like, probably only in very low light situations will you really see a difference, right? Like, most of us are birding during the day, and the difference between a 32 objective and a 42 is going to be a non-start. You won't even notice it during most of the birding during the day. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that I feel strongly that, if you can purchase the best pair of binoculars that you can afford, and you really enjoy your time birding, it does make a difference. If you've ever been one of those people who are out birding and you're with somebody else who is like, oh, check out my binoculars. You look through their binoculars and you're like, wow. Or like, if you see something like a sharper image or a brighter image than your own, and you really feel like, it's a noticeable difference, then you should consider, upgrading your binoculars, or just getting the best binocular you can afford. And it's important to enjoy your time birding. I want to look at the most common bird and just be like, and really feel like I'm enjoying what I'm looking at. And you're going to find that that will make you want to go birding more. And, it's a hobby that we all really enjoy. So, I say, if possible, don't cheap out when it comes to purchasing optics. And I think that's it for me.
Very good.
You and I
Yousif
get along
Jeff?
fine, Yousif.
I'm sorry.
I said, you and I get along fine in the field. I'm like, I always got my scope, I always got my binoculars around my neck too, and same thing. I mean, but I'm kind of a nut, admittedly. You called me out. I'm doing a digiscope in big year this year. Got 500 species digiscope this year, and
I know.
it's
Yeah,
kind of extreme,
that's awesome.
but
Awesome. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. The spotting scope is a game changer. You nailed it.
Yeah, I'm sold. It's now on my Christmas list for this year. Feels like a big ask, but hopefully Santa will come through. Thank you both for lending your knowledge and your own experience and insight. We now have a decent amount of time for some questions, and I have some that have already come in. I'll invite anyone in the audience to continue to put some questions our way, and hopefully the knowledgeable folks on the call can help you out here tonight. The first question that was sent in, talking about using optics beyond birding, what is a good magnification and range for a scope for birding and enjoying wildlife, specifically on safari?
Gotcha. So the one thing about safari is typically you are generally getting close to the animals. So while magnification may not be as critical, it's still always good to have. And Yousif touched on it, and I believe this 100%. Just like the analogy with the naked eye, you can see it with your naked eye, but you look with the binoculars, it's better. I've had friends, just kind of really berate me, or not berate me, but make fun of me for carrying a scope. They're like, Jeff, we're going 30 foot out there, we're going to that bush, and then we get there and we see what we see. But you're enjoying an eyeball shot, and you see the rictal bristles are at the base of the bill, as an example, through a spotting scope at 25 power, or 25 to 60. Except for the compact scopes, most of the full-size scopes generally go from 20 or 25 up to generally about 60 power magnification. The compact scopes vary, and again, you have to make compromises. Some are as low as 30 power magnification, some do 35, 40, ours says up to 45, which I think is the most magnification. That runs from 15 to 45 on our little 55 millimeter. But generally it's you get that zoom eyepiece, and you have the versatility to do whatever you want, and when you get a spotting scope. And that's, I guess, what I'd recommend. There is not necessarily a set power, and the versatility of zoom allows you to be, do whatever you want, and as much as the atmosphere will allow. Sometimes you can go all the way up to 60. Other days, if there's a lot of heat, haze, and shimmer, or dust in the air, you may find that at 40 is your best view, but the versatility of the zoom allows you to select that.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And I hope that answers the question that came through. Lots of good information. The follow-up one to that is, what type of scope is on your Christmas list? And I have to admit that I am an emerging birder. I just got my first set of bins last fall. So I would say I'm a few years off from having a scope. But yeah, maybe Yousif, you can speak to what your go-to is right now.
My go-to for the size, or sorry, the zoom range. Okay, so I found out that I typically stay on I have a zoom eyepiece that goes up to, I believe, 60. Yeah, 60. And I realized that I stayed lower down to in the 30, maybe even less than that range for the most part. Once you start to get into the higher zoom, and I think Jeff can speak better to this, but you'll find that the sharpness of the image and you lose a lot of the light, and it just starts to, yeah, I just feel like the quality goes down. So somewhere between 15 and 30, I think, is my favorite area to scope. And then the size of the objective varies, right? Like you have the compact ones. Most, I think, like regular sized objectives are between 65 and 85, that sort of range. So something, and the thing with spotting scopes is that they do start to get heavy with the increased amount of glass in them, right? So if you're looking at like an 85 millimeter objective, that's a big piece of glass, and there's nothing you can do about the weight of all that glass, right? So somewhere around a 65 millimeter objective is probably a sweet spot. And like a zoom is nice, or a fixed 30 piece eye, 30 times eyepiece would be, you probably can't go wrong with that.
I will say that one thing I'll add to that, Yousif, is the fixed eyepieces used to be a lot more popular. But again, going back to what we talked about with the mid-sized binoculars, the modern zooms, particularly when, I'm going to say within the last decade, the premier models at least have all gone to wide angle zoom eyepieces. And that was the biggest reason for switching to a fixed power, was that in the past, your 20 to 60 zoom was kind of like looking through a drinking straw, but you switch on that fixed power and you had this really sweeping wide field of view, which was just really nice to look through. It offered a lot of eye comfort if you're going to be glassing for a long period of time, but that's kind of gone by the wayside. Because the newer, if you get the wide angle zooms in particular, which are on the premium models at least, you have, again, that versatility of zoom match with that sweet wide field of view, and we find that we can hardly sell wide angle eyepieces anymore, fixed power, because the zooms perform so much better than they did even a decade ago. So that's been a modern advancement in the newer scopes.
Yeah, and there's also very little degradation, of your view at higher powers. Like, you can switch all the way up to 60 power and still get a nice, bright, sharp view with the technology that we have now.
Yeah, there you go. Technologies, it keeps getting better, and
Yeah, no, that's definitely a game changer. I've got the original like TS, what was it, I guess TSM 4 model Kowa from 1990, and it was a great scope. It was the best scope out there at the time. But you compare it now to what we got, even the same millimeter scope, the 77, it's just amazing. And then you put it next to the 88 and 99, you just realize it's like, man, this used to be the best ever, and now it's just looks like kind of, not so good anymore.
And I remember the price of scopes for what you get back then was probably like even more than it is now, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, taking into account inflation and everything else, like you used to pay a lot of money to get
value of money. Yeah,
a scope that would right now no one would even want to look through. That's where it's gone.
Yep, no, agreed. And I mean, again, not to keep tooting the horn of my employer, but it's nice working for Kowa. Our scopes tend to be lighter weight in comparison to direct competitors, and we're only really compared to one other brand typically if you look at the independent reviews. But our comparable models, or models that are even rated ahead of that, tend to be close to $800 or $1,000 less. So that's a big boom, and it makes it more accessible for everybody to have good gear. So
good one.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Switching back to focus on binoculars a little bit here. So cost versus value of optics. Will more expensive binoculars give me a better birding experience, and will I notice a difference as a relatively new birder?
I mean, yeah, Gary, if you want to go ahead there.
Optics is one of those things where you definitely tend to get what you pay for, and in general, you spend a little bit more money, you're going to appreciate a little bit more performance, you know, out of the thing. So you get a little bit more bang for your buck. All things created equal. But again, the best way to do this is to actually look through them yourself and find what looks good to you, and hang out with birders who, you know, they're a friendly bunch. They're happy to share, and you know, you look through there and see what you like, you know, and like, you know, Yousif said, don't cheap out on your binoculars. You know, it's the number one piece of equipment that you use to do this. So it's worth investing a little bit more.
Yeah, and a couple analogies I'll point to, you know, I mean, three of us on the panel are wearing glasses, you know, to think that glasses are nothing more than a single ground lens, you know, in a stylish frame. And, you know, people don't think twice at, you know, coughing up, you know, 300-400 for simple glasses when we get into, you know, progressives and things as we get older. You know, you might be paying $700-800 for that. A binocular has 11 different lenses in each barrel, you know, working together. And two things, you know, a less expensive binocular will allow you to enjoy still the endeavor, but not as well. And the other thing is eye strain becomes, you know, a bigger problem looking through less expensive glass if you're doing it for a long period of time. So those are the two things that, you know, where a better glass is going to treat you better. The other thing is the durability, longevity. You're going to be buying that less expensive glass, even if you're happy with it, more often than you will a top tier glass, just because you have to compromise on the build quality to get a binocular at that price point. So that's another, you know, fair assessment. But I'd say from a straight up birding standpoint, the one point that I've seen over and over again, I lived it myself. When I first started, I wasn't sure if I was going to get into this or stay with it. I didn't have much money, and I kind of crept up, you know, and made 3 jumps. Is you're standing in the field and you're looking at a bird at the treetop that's backlit against, you know, a bright sky, and you're seeing this shape, just this black shape, you know, and the person next to you that has the alpha glass says, oh, it's a female black Bernie, and you're like, what are you talking about? I see a little black blob. And, you know, you say, can I borrow your binoculars and look at it? And by golly, you know, you can see markings, and, you know, the shadows that you're seeing are completely filled by the better quality glass because the light delivery, things like that, but it's expensive, you know, and I think Yousif nailed it on the head. If you buy the best glass you can afford, generally speaking, you're going to be happier and you're going to have a better time in the field throughout your birding experience, you know. So that's
right on.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. The next question is about the range that you own personally. Do you find that you go out with more than one pair of binoculars at a time?
It's an unfair question for me because I have all of them. I have the complete sample set here at home, so it's like I can use whatever I want. So I'll let Yousif take that one. But
well, I
Yeah,
often bird with my wife too, so we always have at least 2 pairs of binoculars with us.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you've got more than one pair of binoculars, and you're able to, you know, if you have a full size, you have one with sort of a smaller objective, a little bit lighter, depending on the case, you can use different binoculars. And if you know you're going to be doing like an all-day hawk watch or something like that, yeah, go for the higher magnification in that case, and don't forget your scope. If you can afford multiple binoculars, sure. I wouldn't carry more than one at a time, though. It's probably too much,
Especially if you're carrying a spotting scope at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and that's the one thing I was going to say is because I carry a spotting scope everywhere. I am one of those people who used it from day one. You know, even as a teenager, I was shaky. You know, I've proven it to myself over and over and over that I do much better with lower power magnification. And I was even one of these guys that used a 742 as a professional birder, doing hawk watching and everything else, day in and day out, because I found I could resolve detail better because I shake too much to try and heave a 10 around, even when I'm hawk watching. Now that said, I always had a spotting scope on my hip, so when I needed more magnification, it was there. So it is a little bit of a catch-22, but I've always loved the spotters. So
Mhm.
but,
Absolutely. Yeah. That lower magnification is going to give you more field of view, a steady image. And then if it's just a little bit out of your reach, you've got the spotting scope on your hip there. Pull it out. You're covered.
So that's an important test too, is when you're selecting an optic, when you find the line that you like, see how well you can handle the higher magnification, and see, if you prefer the lower magnification. Because if you're even getting an inkling of one way or the other in mere minutes of use, that's going to manifest itself over a day of use, tenfold, so it's trust your instincts there. And the same with the ergonomics that you hit before. If something feels good for a few minutes in your hand and to your eyes, it's going to be that much more over the course of a day. It's the right decision, even if it's surprising or it's not the one you thought you were going to select.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly touch on, because I forgot to mention that, the eyepiece and the feel of the eyepiece. If you're not an eyeglass wearer, you're going to be putting that eyepiece right up to into your eye socket. Right? It's going to be brushed sitting up under your eyebrow. It depends on how you hold your binoculars, but if you're an eyeglass wearer, eye relief is important, and you're really going to want to try out a few pairs to see what works best for you getting that full image with through your while wearing glasses. So
Yeah, it's a variable spec between different brands of binoculars as the eye relief, and be able to have that focal point right for your eyes while you're wearing your glasses.
Yeah, and that's one of the most dynamic measurements, I would say. So don't ever base it on a number. Okay, I know I've worked for optics for a long time now, and I had a lot of people. I won't bury any particular optics company, but there was one in particular that used to just list numbers that were insane. And people would say, well, I tried brand X, and they had a 16 millimeter, and it didn't work for me. It wasn't enough, so I didn't even try any of yours. And I was like, try them, and lo and behold, they work. It's just, that's one of those, it's really hard to measure, and I think some companies take advantage of the fact maybe that is hard to measure and overstate perhaps. But so again, it just goes back to, don't use those numbers on paper. It's really important, like you said, to try them, put them to your face, look through them. And that's why, if you can go to one of these shops that has a wide array, or go to a festival where there's a dealer present, or the manufacturers are present, is another great way to do it if you don't have a dealer in your area. And check them all out, try them out. Super important.
I'll just add that hunting stores often have a good selection of binoculars.
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
just want to start getting into you're starting to shop, you're trying things out, those hunting stores usually have a pretty good selection. And that's
The one thing I will add, and it goes to what you said, you prefer the lower power. I prefer the lower power. As a lower power guy in particular, I've been hypersensitive to the fact that in hunting, it does seem bigger is always better, is the mentality. And very often you can't find the 8, or certainly not like a 7X model there. They'll have the 1042 to look at, very often, and nothing else. So yeah, certainly, I mean, go and check them out. But if they don't have those other options, you want to check, try them. Don't settle if they're not giving you the other option. That's one thing, that I see a lot of the big box stores in particular.
This is a perfect lead in, because Kowa will be with the Toronto Bird Celebration at the Brampton Big Sit on May 13th, and you'll be able to come free of charge, try out the whole line that Gary will have there on that day.
We'll be there.
And if you can't make it on that day, I'm going to point you to Wild Birds Unlimited in Toronto. Got some really knowledgeable folks at those stores to be able to help you find the right pair for you. As you've heard tonight, it's all about feel and fit. So make sure you actually get your hands on a pair of binoculars to see if they're going to be the right ones for you. And speaking of getting your hands on a pair of binoculars, Kowa is one of the big sponsors this year for the Toronto Bird Celebration. And they have so generously added some wicked prizes to our grand prizes this year. And I'll just share my screen quickly so you can see it. Our Celebrity contests opened next week on May 1st All you have to do is tell us what birds you're seeing during the spring migration on the Birds Canada Instagram or on Twitter. And then you'll be entered to win one of 4 grand prizes, including a pair of Kowa binoculars, some gear from Fjällräven, and some beautiful birding books from Firefly Books, as well as lots of other great stuff that's thrown into those prize packs. So this could be the perfect place for you to start your optics journey and get your hands on a pair of Kowas for this upcoming season.
Right on.
Okay, there we are. We don't have any other questions in the chat. The only one that is hanging around is, are there day trips from my area to birding sites? And I'm going to direct you to the Toronto Bird Celebration website because there are so many amazing birding events happening right in the GTA through the next coming 6 or 8 weeks. And you can find lots of free ones on the Toronto Bird Celebration website. There are early morning hikes and dawn choruses. There's paddle birding around Toronto Island. There's more great webinars and information sessions like this. And if you have any questions, please send them my way. I'm going to thank our very knowledgeable panel tonight, Gary, Yousif, and Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us and for lending your knowledge. I am going to now put some info in the chat for you. If you have any questions, please just email me. And if you fill out the survey that you attended a bird celebration event, you could also be entered to win some great prizes. Oh, one person is asking what's happening May 13th in Brampton, the Big Sit event. So we will be there for about 4 or 5 hours. Full information on the Bird Celebration website. But come out, we'll have a birding expert there to guide you through everything that you're viewing through one small radius in a park, see what's hanging around that day bird-wise. We'll be there with the Brampton Library, and Kowa will be there to do some optics feeling out and testing in the field, which is great. Okay, if there's no more questions, again, I'll direct you to the chat. Please send them all to my inbox. I'm happy to filter them to the folks on the panel here tonight. Kowa, again, thank you so much for joining us and for celebrating migration with us this year and for continuing to support the conservation of wild birds in Canada. Yousif, always nice to work with you, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks
so much.
for taking care of this, Olivia. Thank you.
Hey,
Great.
my pleasure. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks.